Welcome to Heart Riffing, a podcast by way of the heart. Here we explore what it means to reconnect with your essence and live from a place of personal freedom. If you're interested in learning more about our courses, mentoring and workshops, feel free to visit wayoftheheart.com.au. We're so glad you're here and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to Heart Riffing with Bello and
Jess.
There we go. Episode number 3. Here we are. And today we are going to just have a big riff about the whole idea, a central kind of idea in Way of the Heart about being externally referenced and being internally referenced and what we exactly mean about that and what are some of the things that we might want to apply or think about in regards to being internally or externally referenced. So Grand Inquisitor is going to ask us the questions, and that's going to be a good place for us to start.
That's it. I think you've actually set it up really well. Internal versus external referencing is something that we've talked about briefly in the previous podcast, and we do talk about it a lot in Way of the Heart. Can we, I guess, just start to define what is internal referencing, what is external referencing, and we can go from there.
Yeah, okay. So when we talk about internal referencing, what we're talking about is we're talking about being attuned or being aligned or being grounded in our own essence, in our own being. So it's not the world according to me, but it's engaging the world in such a way that I'm completely attentive and aware of who I am, where is going to be helpful for me to live and be and operate, all the kind of we kind of have the 6 heart questions, and maybe we've answered those questions or maybe we're aware of that. When you meet someone that's internally referenced, what you find is that they're not outsourcing themselves in a particular environment. So they're not stepping in an environment to please anyone, prove anything. They're not engaging in the hustle. And they're just basically turning up as themselves. And you might call a person like that being really authentic. They know themselves, they're happy with themselves, or maybe they're not happy with themselves. Maybe there's some things that they're working on, but what they're not doing is that they're not onboarding all this information from out here about who they should be, where they should be, what they should be doing, what they should have, what they shouldn't have. And if you look at so much of the world that we live in, a lot of people don't carry that kind of presence.
Mm-hmm.
When you meet someone like that has that kind of presence, it's great because it's just easy, A lot of the time, the opposite is happening for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening is we're so attuned to the stuff that's happening out here. We wake up and we wake up and it's like the world. It's almost like we don't have borders.
Yeah.
I think the definition of a borderline personality disorder is that the borders become so porous that the world keeps collapsing in on someone. And so they lose their identity, and it becomes quite a self-destructive place because the person is looking to figure out who they are and what's going on, and they feel like they've got no control in their world because this is happening and this is happening and this person wants this and this said that. And many people kind of don't fall into, say, a borderline personality disorder, but many people have this sense that the world is constantly bombarding them.
Yeah, right.
And that's what we mean by that's what I mean by being externally referenced.
So that's like our definition of internal versus external referencing. I think it's kind of hard though because we are taught to be externally referenced all the time, and when we externally reference, we're rewarded for it, right? So, I mean, even from day dot, like as a kid, you look to your parents for approval and to be told that you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. You go into school, and if you adhere well to the system or to that particular institution, you get rewarded through, awards or positions of leadership or whatever it is. And that carries through from infancy all the way to adulthood. And so there aren't really many points of reference where you're being rewarded for being internally referenced. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think, how do you manage that? How do you live in a world that rewards external referencing and work to deconstruct that to become internally referenced?
I think maybe what we don't do is we don't set up a straw man. I think what I mean by that is I think you're completely right. We live in a world where we constantly are taking the temperature of the world out there. We're constantly being impacted by things outside of ourselves. We're constantly going into environments or going into situations, whether it's, I know this week I'm going to go to a wedding, right? And so there's going to be a whole lot of people I'm going to meet, and I'm probably going to sit beside someone that I don't know or that I haven't met, or blah, 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 blah. I'm going to take the temperature of the room. I'm going to engage people. I'm going to be very polite, all this sort of stuff. It's not going to be a moment to display myself. It's not a Greg moment. It's a niece moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there will be some external referencing that I do there just to be polite and to be appropriate. There's no problem with that. So the straw man is not, when I say a straw man, what I mean is we don't want to set up a bogeyman, fully internally referenced person, never externally references. Well, that's not true. We do all the time. We calibrate to our environment. That's called being sensitive. It's called being appropriate. It's called being generous and loving towards other people. It's called reading the room and behaving in a way that doesn't unnecessarily cause offense, right? So there's no problem with external referencing until external referencing becomes the only reference that you've got. Right? It's like until I become so driven by what everyone else thinks and what everyone else needs that I don't even know what I need. I don't even know who I am. Because then what will happen is a really strange transaction will happen is I'll start to become something that is completely contradictory to who I am. Now, that's an unsustainable person.
Yeah.
That's a person who's presenting something. But if it's not who they are, then they have to adopt a whole lot of behaviors to keep being that person. Right? That's hard work. That's really, really hard work. We say that a lot of times, where you see it in job interviews where someone goes for a job interview and they really want to get the job. And so the primary thought they have is, how do I present well?
Yeah.
What do these people want? How do I present well? How do I give them the employee that they want to employ? And how do I be first? How do I get that job, right? Great. So just say you get the job. Then you turn up on day one. Guess what you've got to turn up and be?
That thing that you've
either got to turn up and be that thing that you promised or that you presented, or you got to turn up and be yourself. Now, if there's a gap between what you projected and who you are, well, that's an existential crisis on day one.
Yeah.
Right? That's super hard because I'm pretending to be, I presented something which was maybe more or impressive or more polished or more refined, and now I'm showing up. And the dichotomy or the challenge there is at some point, who you really are will, as we say, seep out. You know what I mean?
But this is funny because, like you said a little bit earlier on, in some situations, in order to be polite or to be, I don't know, loving, kind, or appropriate, you do have to show up as something else.
Well, it's interesting because the thing that again, this is a secret thing that no one ever notices, right? Is that in those situations, it's almost like the social system is nominating how we behave. So the job interview is a really good one. How many people go to a job interview going, listen, I'm happy for them to press in and find out who I really am, but what I'll be doing is I'll be putting them on show. I'll be asking them to see whether who they are is the kind of place that I can go. Most people go, I'm just trying to present really well so they like who I am and I can be, I can get the job. Really what a job interview is yes, they need to see whether they like you. Well, if I ever did do a job interview or something like that, the biggest issue on my mind is whether I like them.
Yeah.
Is yours the sort of workplace that I could be in? Do I even want this contract? Do I want to enter into a relationship with these sort of people? Now, what is not being negotiated in that kind of transaction is me. I'm not negotiating who I truly am in order to align with them. I'm measuring whether we actually naturally align and whether we naturally resonate, right? So the challenge is not, again, the challenge is not this straw man of like, do you fully externally reference all the time or do you internally reference? The challenge is to have enough internal referencing and internal awareness that you actually show up and that you participate and that you suspend the systems that, you know, the kind of the tacit systems in play that say you're not allowed to show up. Like in a job interview, show up like we want you to. Yeah, you show up like I want you to.
Yeah.
See, the system is one way. The system works from employer to prospective employee. It's a one-way system.
Yeah.
Really, it's actually not. When you go and work for someone, it's exactly the same. If you're in a job with someone and you can't show up, that's actually a problem for both people. It's a problem for them, but it's also a problem for you.
Yeah.
So suspend the system that says you have to become like they want
Yeah.
and go, well, that isn't going to happen.
Yeah. This is a funny one, I think, to apply to a social setting as well. I think that for me personally, throughout a lot of my teens and probably early 20s, when trying to make friends, I would first do a little analysis. Okay, who do I need to be, or what type of person do I need to be in order to belong in this particular circle? But the consequence of that was I would have people who would say, "Oh, you're such a good friend," or "You're one of my best friends," but I felt completely unknown by that person because I was just showing up as what I thought that they wanted me to be. And so when inevitably my essence did leak out, then it was kind of like that. Who are you? Or I don't want to be friends anymore, and the friendship fell apart.
Yeah.
But it was completely unsustainable for me to stay unknown and in that friendship.
Yeah. So I think this kind of goes to the heart of some of the heavy lifting that we ask people to do in Way of the Heart. I was exactly the same. It's very, very common for me. It was very, very common for me in social situations to go into a situation and to go, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And then I'm 15 questions deep.
Yeah.
And I can tell them, I know you, I know what you do, I know the name of your kids, I know where you live, I know you like cars, I know that your son is a plumber, I know your daughter's doing law, but the guy can't even remember my name.
Yeah.
It's like, so
This was a fun interview,
what I've done is I've been so busy calibrating to that individual.
Yeah.
And then they'll go, "Well, I'm just going to go and get a drink now." And they walk off and you go, and then you start the process again. "Hi, how are you?" "I'm Bello." "Oh, yeah, okay, great. Yeah, what do you know?" I'm Carmine. "Great, Carmine, what do you do?" Blah, 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 blah. And then you go off with it. So this is this whole process where it's very normal a lot of the time socially to be, if you're vaguely awake, if you're vaguely people orientated, which you and I both are, to be on the front foot. And a lot of the time you do feel unseen. Maybe, and again, this is a discipline, this is the heavy lifting piece. Maybe sometimes you just stay silent.
Yeah.
That I find that I used to think that I was quite extroverted. The more I've gone into Way of the Heart, the more I realize I'm actually an introvert with skills.
Yeah.
And the older I get, I'm an introvert with skills, but a lot of the time I don't want to use those skills. A lot of the time I'm going to go to something, and if people aren't going to make any effort, if people aren't going to meet me halfway, then I'm not going 90% of the way. I'm not going to be the one that jumps over every hurdle to get to know someone. I'm not going to be so busy, so needy of trying to build the bridge. And if you checked out my journals, you'd see in my journals a frequent reflection about me building bridges into other people's lives, always building bridges, always building bridges, that's going to fatigue anyone. Like that's just not a healthy thing to do. I think that this, and you will resonate with this. I wrote a poem about living the examined life. that people like you and I, and probably people doing Way of the Heart, is we love the deeper questions, right? So in terms of, do you swim on the surface and just skim over life, or do you do the deep dive? I just realized that my people were people that did the deep dive. They liked questions more than answers. They liked and examined life more than an easy transactional life. So when I meet someone that just is happy to bounce along the surface, there's a really good chance that it doesn't matter what bridge I build into their space, because they're already bouncing along. They've already moved on. Classic example was, funnily enough, I was in a Marrakesh market recently, right? So I'm in the middle of Morocco. I'm in the middle of a market in Marrakesh. There's a bazillion people, and I see someone that I know.
Really?
Like random, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of catch up, it's like I haven't seen this person for almost since I left school, right?
Wow.
So a long time. What do you do? Blah, 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 blah. And then there's this deep question that he asks, right? And I know that I'm meant to give
XYZ answer.
I'm meant to give a simple answer because we're in a market in Marrakesh, for goodness sake, we're not going to, and I really struggle to give the lightweight answer. So I kind of give a half answer, which kind of gives him a hint that the answer is a little bit more complex. There's a little bit more, and he feeds back with a very generous platitude. Oh, you want to keep that up. It's really good for you, as if as if there's no backstory. We're just chit chatting about deep shit. But where I was coming from was really deep.
Yeah.
And what I get back is a kind of a 20, stick the 20 cents in, you get a little plastic thing and you get, no. But that's actually my fault. That's actually not his fault. Because I probably should have just either dodged the question or just given a glib answer and realized that in a Marrakesh market, in a 5-second catch up, we're not going to go to
20,000 feet.
70,000 feet, right?
Yeah.
Or 7,000 feet or 10. We're not even going below the surface. We're just going to be bubbling along the top.
This kind of links back to what you were saying earlier in the job interview space where you're, like the onus is simultaneously on you to suss out whether this is somebody who you want to give that information to, or you want to go to that depth with, or if there's someone who you want to engage with. And I don't know, it seems like there are, in any given interaction, professionally or personally, there are a series of not necessarily checkpoints, but it's kind of like you throw out a little bit of bait and you see if there's a bite there, and if there is, then you go a bit deeper and a bit deeper.
I think that's true. And that was probably, the fault was not on the lovely guy that I met in that I reacquainted with in the Marrakesh market. The fault was that inside of me, I like depth.
Yeah.
But this transaction has no room for depth. So don't bring it.
Yeah.
Don't bring the depth. It's not going to go anywhere. He's not going to have the time to respond. There's not time to tell him the 50 different things that have happened because we're still in a Marrakesh market just doing pleasantries, right? So sometimes I think, the internal life is going to cause you to want, the internal referencing is going to cause you to need to just be aware that the core, the substance of who you are can't be expressed in a soundbite.
Yeah.
We're talking about really deep stuff here, right? Whereas a lot of external living is completely soundbite orientated. A lot of the external stuff, a lot of the way we transact is just that. It's just transactional. Way of the Heart life is, it has to be transactional at one level in terms of just general, but really we're talking about deep level of substance, deep level of connection, deep level of, turning up, which you have to bring some discernment to.
Yeah.
How then? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes total sense. I think the place that my mind goes then is that can be a lonely experience, like if you're not, it is and it isn't, I've found that when I'm living internally, it's like, great, I'm in alignment. This is, this is good stuff. But then if there's nobody around you who's also living from that space, or nobody around you who has the capability of engaging in that, then that can mean long periods of, oh, I'm doing this by myself.
Yeah, but it's not nearly as lonely, and this is always the interesting part. It's not nearly as lonely as turning up to a transaction when you want depth and kind of being subtly rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Because the person goes, why are you getting so deep?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you offering that?
Mm.
So I think I find that a form of social rejection that makes me feel quite like a complete
Yeah.
outlier.
Yeah.
Holding my peace and discerning, holding the truth of who I am, discerning when it's wise to express that and when it's wise to sit on that.
Mm.
That feels like maturity.
Yeah.
Not outsourcing, because it's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes we want to express the depth because we're actually looking to meet a need.
Yeah. Which ironically is
Which is a form of external referencing, right?
Yeah.
So it's also being honest about the fact that in my Marrakesh example is I don't need this guy to affirm me.
Mm.
I don't need to share with him some really deep thing because I'm not looking for him to say, oh, wow, mate, you've been on an incredible journey, or haven't you done some work, or aren't you insightful, or, why do you need that? That's an external reference, right? So there's a part of me that thinks we're never going to get this right because we do externally reference. And what we're really aiming for in Way of the Heart is not that you never care about what anyone says about you. That's not an awakened life. That's just it's an arrogant life. But what we want to do is we want to be significant, sufficiently internally referenced to the point where we can say to that part of us, that ego part of us that wants to be affirmed, that wants to be loved, we can, there's a grounded part of us that go, hey, dude, why do you need that person's affirmation?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you need to belong?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you need to go to your niece's wedding this Friday and feel like everyone likes you or everyone sees you, or everyone just go, the Taoists were beautiful in this regard. They said the sage in Taoism, they go, the sage is uncontrived, which just meant a contrived life is where you're game planning everything so it goes just a particular way. So you might be a job interview is a classic example. You're wearing what you think is appropriate. You've prepared things to say that you think are appropriate. You've got your 5 questions which you think are appropriate. You've studied the company that you're going to work for, so you just understand exactly what they're looking for, and then you go and everything is completely contrived. And then you get out and you go, I never even showed up to that interview.
Yeah.
Because it was so contrived.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know people who go to social events and they contrive who they're going to sit with, what conversation they're going to have, what they want that person to say back to them. I've got someone in my life that does that all the time. It's not boss, but it's, and it's a completely contrived process. Now, what the Tao said is the sage just shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And what's showing up? The true person. The true self is showing up. And as they show up, whatever they transact is whatever they transact. And behind that idea is the idea that they're aware and that they're actually sufficient to meet their own needs. They're not outsourcing. They're not outsourcing their needs and manipulating or contriving situations so this person gives me what I want or what I feel like I need. That's probably the state that we're trying to get to, maybe beautifully summed up through the Taoists, is an uncontrived life, being able to be present without agenda, being able to show up without some fawning need driving the program.
Yeah. How then do you get to that point, or it requires a lot of intention, right? Like I find myself outsourcing all the time.
Yeah, until you're not. I mean, you're probably being a little bit. I mean, loving kindness is a good thing here, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Bash.
yeah, and I know as your dad,
Some internal work that I need to do.
and
Clearly,
I know as your dad that in some of our transactions, you're not outsourcing what you need at all.
Yeah.
You know, like you're letting me know. You know, I know what I want here, Dad. So back the 5. You know, so you may not be as bad at this as what you think you are.
Yeah.
Having said that,
We'll talk about.
Having said that, this is the life curriculum.
Yeah.
Way of the Heart's not here solving a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Way of Heart is here saying to you, hey, here's this dynamic. Here's this dynamic. Most people are almost entirely externally referenced.
Mm-hmm.
They're showing up wanting the external world to meet all their needs. Nothing wrong with the external world meeting your needs, but it is a problem when you're so dependent on people out there and things out there meeting your needs that you start to outsource yourself, and that the core of who you are, the essence of who you are, isn't even showing up. And even worse than that you start to contrive and manipulate and control situations. Think of how many people are addicted to control. You've got to control every single thing in their life. If things don't go the way they want, they get discombobulated, they get frustrated, they get angry. It's like, dude, that's a hard way to live your life. There's no flow in that life. There's just, you know, the favorite things that we see in so much of the systems that we're part of, just control, dominate, drive, you know, homogenize, be like this, do it this way, drive this car, you know, have this new thing. You know, I've got friends who would talk about the fundamental kind of market conditioning that goes into playing on people's needs so that they keep on showing up, needing the next transaction, the next commodity to meet some kind of status drama going on in their life. Like, that's a problem. That's a problem. We're not necessarily solving that problem, but what we are doing is we're saying, hey, no one ever shines a spotlight on this. No one ever goes, hey, you know, there's a difference between being externally referenced and internally referenced, which is not to say that being internally referenced is exclusive. You know, it's not to say that we don't ever take the temperature externally. It's not to say that being internally referenced is the only thing that you should be. But the fact is, if you don't do it at all, you're in trouble.
Yeah. I think that is a really important nuance to touch on, that being internally referenced isn't exclusive. I didn't know the nuance between internally referenced, like that you needed to be internally referenced some of the time. I genuinely thought that I thought it was a dichotomy between the two, where you either were internally referenced or you were externally referenced, and it was black and white, which then, if I would have a conversation with Ted, for example, or I go about my daily life and I go, well, how can I be internally referenced all of the time? Because there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going on that I need to engage in.
Yeah. So I think I think understanding the nuance piece, right, is something that we're trying to do a lot in Way of the Heart. Because flow is not, I mean, I think ancient Chinese wisdom does this really well. When they play with things like absence and presence, you know, which is really the conversation between form or formlessness and form, right? What they're saying is, in their estimation of it, is that life is this dance between formlessness and form, right? And what they have running through that is that they don't think that substance and essence dissolves. Form dissolves, but essence keeps going. Here's another way of saying that. Here's the world and everything in it. And the earth as it stands moves through light and dark. A day rolls into a night, rolls into a day, rolls into a night, and we move through vivid light to deepest darkness, to vivid light to deepest darkness. And so there's, you can't get two more opposite poles, light and dark, right? So we love in the modern society to go, that's light, that's dark, it's one or the other, right? What the Taoists are saying is what ancient Chinese wisdom says is, especially in, say, the yin yang thing, the classic symbol is, no, it's all interwoven into it. So if you go to Meteora in Greece, and you go up onto some of the monasteries that are built on the top of these like spires that come, thousands of feet out of the ground, and on top is a monastery, and you have to cross a bridge to get into it. And here's this monastic community that's been there for the last 600 years, and you go into their chapels. What's really interesting about the Meteoran chapels is that you could stand in one little corner of the chapel and be invisible because it's just dark. And then if you take 2 steps out, there's this stream of light and you are completely visible. So they've done this kind of architecture in their chapels, which is a bit like the ancient Chinese wisdom. It's a play between light and dark. One minute I'm in complete darkness, the next minute I'm flooded in light, right? What does that tell us? It's all metaphorically pointing to a really fundamental truth, is that we don't exist in the poles. We don't exist in pure darkness. We don't exist singularly in pure light. We exist in this state where there is darkness and there's light. And at one moment we could be flooded in, and at another moment we could be concealed in darkness. At one moment we could be fully present. At another moment we could be seemingly completely absent, right? And essence is playing in that kind of in that medium, in that platform. Our lives are being lived out like that. It's only someone who radically simplifies their life that says, "Oh, my life can be divided into binaries. My life can be divided into poles. It's this or it's this. It's this or it's this." So when we say, are you internally referenced? It's not to say, here's the binary, you must live in the light of being internally referenced. That's not true. Sometimes you have to be externally referenced, right? But what we're saying is we live in a society which overwhelmingly says externally referenced is the way you live your life. If you want to be popular, do this. If you want to be fit, do this. If you want to be approved, do this. If you want to be powerful, do this. And it's all this sort of stuff. If you want to be a businessman, wear this suit. Wear a dark blue suit with a red tie. Look like this person. Do this. Say this. Go to this school. Have this. Drive this car. Live in these suburbs. It's like it's all bullshit.
Yeah, and then you've built an entire identity that's based on that, and that inevitably changes.
Well, you've built all of that, but then what hasn't turned up for that? What may not have turned up for that? So just say I go and do all of that.
Yeah.
And I become a businessman. That's fine. Where's Bello?
Yeah.
I might not even show up for that. I might not even I mean, in my life, if I was to do that, that's fine. I become that thing. But in Way of the Heart, we're saying there is no becoming. I was something before, and in the process of becoming that, then there's a self-abandonment, right? So what we're saying is you cannot do the self-abandonment. You cannot do the point where you're so ignorant, you're so fundamentally ignorant of who you are at the core of your being, which is really just about listening to your heart, which beautifully and adequately represents your essence. You cannot be so so much in your head, in your ego, in your drivenness, that you forget to turn up as a heartfelt individual. So I'm a brilliant businessman per se. I'm a brilliant soldier. I'm a brilliant whatever I need to be. There's no heart in it. Because the moment I tap into my heart over here, my heart would be saying, "Who the hell are you?
Yeah.
Who are you?"
Yeah.
So yeah, we're doing a dance between needing to calibrate with our external environment, needing to engage with our external environment. But what we're saying in Way of the Heart is like the binary is that everyone lives there. and very few people are coming back here to do the internal referencing. And Way of the Heart as a spiritual discipline, and this is all we think spirituality is in Way of the Heart. We don't think spirituality is a doctrine or a dogma or a theology. All we say that Way of the Heart is the inward discipline of coming back to self and paying attention to self sufficiently that I can then say, I know who I am, so therefore I can engage. I can engage out here without losing myself. And sometimes that means I stay silent. Sometimes that means I speak up. Sometimes that means I walk away. Sometimes that means I take a fixed position. I represent, I speak out, I do whatever I need to do. It'll mean lots of different things out there. But what we're saying is this inwardness should be shaping that.
Not the other way.
Not that externality shaping this.
Yeah.
Because when the externality is shaping this doesn't get shaped, it just gets suppressed.
I think a lot of questions that might come up are, well, how do I access my essence, or how do I, as though it takes a lot of striving and a lot of effort to magically uncover who you are. But I think that everybody will know through, one pattern or one thing that pops up or another. Like, I think if you had a moment to sit and be still, you would know the parts of yourself that make you who you are.
Yeah, and it's an allowing dynamic. It's a permission giving dynamic. It's like we mentioned, this Zen-like state. I hate Zen. I've read Dogen. He's right there. I've read Dogen. I've read heaps of Buddhist literature. I'm 6'4". I hate sitting cross-legged on the ground. I have about 5 minutes of me in that. Literally, the word Zen is Zazen, which means sitting. And sitting for them is like sitting on the ground in the correct, sutra, in the correct posture, with everything aligned, and just being present. And I'm there for 30 seconds and go, I hate this.
My back hurts.
My back hurts. My bum's sore. And they would say, persevere through that. And I go, no. So for me, I don't condition. I don't make the way that I turn inwards have to look like anyone. It doesn't have to look like Zen. When I was part of Christian spirituality, everyone talked about centering prayer. I hated that stuff. People talked about fasting. Clearly, I hate that rubbish. I don't want to fast. I don't want to be hungry. I don't find that spiritual. I just find that annoying. So what do? I love journaling.
Yeah.
I love reading. I love being on my own. I love walking. I find ways to turn inward and be present for myself. That's spirituality. It's not anyone else's spirituality. It's not doing something that gives you no life. Spirituality is turning inwards, coming home to who you really are, bringing loving kindness to that. And you do that get there any way you can get there. But if you never get there, then the reality is you probably don't know much about who you are. You probably haven't allowed yourself the freedom. Maybe you've tried to do some spiritual disciplines and they didn't work for you. Great, it didn't work for me either. Just find something that helps you get there. Because if you don't do that, what you'll find your whole life is like a dog on a lead. You're being dragged around by someone else's system, someone else's process, someone else's agenda. And maybe you're a really compliant dog and you get pulled around and you go, yeah, okay, I'm following. You kind of wag your tail from time to time, but really in your heart of hearts, you got to let this puppy off the leash. I don't want to do this anymore. And I meet so many people that just, they want to get off the leash.
Yeah.
They want to be them. They want to turn up to life.
So that first step is really allowing.
Allowing whatever it is that allows you to connect with yourself. It's okay. It's okay. It doesn't have to look like Zen. It doesn't have to look like a yoga sutra. It doesn't have to be buying the Lululemons and going off to yoga. You might not find it on a mat.
Maybe not.
You know, you might find it with a set of headphones on, listening to some Pink Floyd and having a beer on the porch by yourself. Okay, great. Then you've got the spiritual discipline of beer drinking and Pink Floyd listening. Well, that's not spiritual. Who said?
Yeah.
If it connects you with who you are, it is spiritual.
Mm.
You know, you probably could make a very successful religion out of that. You know, probably a lot of people would turn up for that. Whether you would be healthy in the long term.
There you go, top tips.
Yeah, top
to
tips.
start a religion.
But you know, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't, and it shouldn't matter if someone judges that. That's on them.
Yeah.
I don't judge it. You'd, as my middle daughter would say, you do you, boo.
Yeah.
You know, you do you.
Wise words.
Wise words. Yeah.
Love it. Cool.
All right.
Great. Thank you very much.
No worries. Good to chat.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Heart Riffing. If today's conversation resonated, you can find more of our work, including courses, mentoring, and workshops, at www.wayoftheheart.com.au or on our Instagram, Way of the Heart Official. We'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, or questions, so please always feel free to message or comment. We look forward to seeing you next time.